Either pay the down payment on my SUV or get out of this house, my daughter Amanda demanded. Her voice echoed through the hallway, sharp and completely detached from reality. It was a chilly Thursday evening, and I was standing near the entryway of a home I had practically funded from the ground up. For the better part of a decade, Amanda had treated my bank account like an endless, magical well. Whenever her lifestyle outpaced her actual income, my savings bridged the gap. I glanced into the living room. My second husband, Richard, was completely absorbed in a sports broadcast. We had been married for 12 years, and in all that time, his primary survival skill was pretending conflict didn't exist. Amanda grabbed the handles of my two packed suitcases and shoved them forcefully onto the front porch. The heavy thud of the wheels hitting the wood should have triggered a reaction from Richard. It didn't. He just picked up the remote and increased the volume. He didn't turn his head. He didn't offer a single syllable of protest. His silence was louder than Amanda's shouting. It was absolute, undeniable proof that to these people, I was nothing more than a human ATM. Amanda stood in the doorway, crossing her arms. She fully expected me to sigh, pull out my smartphone, and transfer the $10,000 she was short for a luxury vehicle she absolutely could not afford. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't try to reason with her. My days of trying to explain financial responsibility to a grown woman were completely finished. I picked up my purse, adjusted my scarf, and looked her straight in the eyes. "Fine," I replied. That one syllable completely derailed her train of thought. Her arms dropped a fraction of an inch, but before she could formulate a response, I turned around and walked to my car. There was no screaming, no dramatic farewell. Just the sound of my engine starting as I drove away from a life I was entirely done funding. My phone vibrated on the passenger seat. It was Richard. I powered it off completely and drove into the night wondering what they would do when reality finally hit them. I drove steadily for half an hour until I spotted a simple, well-lit motel off the highway. The room was basic beige walls, a sturdy wooden desk, and a firm mattress, but as I set my bags down, it felt like the most luxurious space in the world. The silence was absolute. There were no demands, no heavy sighs about unpaid bills, no expectations to fix someone else's mess. I sat on the edge of the bed and unzipped my tote bag, pulling out my laptop. For years, I had maintained a joint household account with Amanda to make paying her rent and utilities easier. I also shared an account with Richard, which was essentially just a funnel for my late husband's pension to cover Richard's excessive credit card habits. I had confused financial support with love, thinking that clearing the path for them would make our family stronger. Instead, I had simply bankrolled their disrespect. I logged into my banking portal. The interface loaded, displaying the comfortable balances I had meticulously managed. I didn't need to argue, and I didn't need anyone's permission to reclaim what belonged to me. With a few deliberate clicks, I transferred the entire balance of the joint account I shared with Amanda into my private individual savings. Next, I navigated to the automatic payments dashboard. I canceled the monthly scheduled transfer for her rent. I canceled the autopay for her electric and internet bills. Then I opened the account tied to Richard. I emptied my funds from it and severed the automatic payments covering his 3 separate credit cards. The money was mine, earned through decades of hard work and careful saving, and I was taking it back. I closed the laptop and placed it on the nightstand. My chest felt incredibly light, as if a physical weight had been lifted from my ribs. I pulled the stiff motel blankets up to my chin, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow morning, Amanda was going to the dealership, and it was going to be a very interesting day. I woke up at sunrise feeling more rested than I had in years. I walked down to the motel's small diner, ordered a black coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs, and finally powered my phone back on. The screen immediately lit up with a flood of notifications. First, I saw a text from my son, Nathan. He lived in Chicago, completely independent, and had always warned me that Amanda was taking advantage of my generosity. Morning, Mom. Hope everything is okay. Call me later. I smiled, tapped out a quick reply, assuring him I was perfectly fine, and then scrolled down to the disaster zone. There were 11 missed calls, 7 from Amanda, 4 from Richard. The text messages escalated in panic by the minute. Amanda, 9:05 a.m. Mom, I'm at the dealership. The card declined. Transfer the money right now. Amanda, 9:12 a.m. This isn't funny. The sales guy is staring at me. Fix the account. Amanda, 9:25 a.m. What did you do to the money? Answer your phone. Richard, 9:40 a.m. Diane, where are you? Amanda is hysterical. Come back home so we can sort this out. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter roasted flavor. For so long, an urgent text from Amanda would have sent my heart rate through the roof. I would have dropped everything to smooth things over. Today, I just felt a profound sense of calm. By throwing my bags on the porch, Amanda had severed the only branch keeping her afloat. I deleted the text threads without replying. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin, paid my tab, and walked out to my car. It was time to find a permanent place of my own, somewhere with plenty of sunlight and a heavy lock on the door. My phone vibrated again as I pulled out of the parking lot, but I let it ring. I spent the late morning touring a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood. I didn't need a sprawling house anymore. I just wanted a space that belonged entirely to me. A local property manager showed me a bright 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a secure building. It had large windows, a small balcony perfect for potted plants and deadbolts that looked incredibly sturdy. I'll take it, I stated, pulling out my checkbook. I signed the lease on the kitchen counter using funds that were now entirely out of Amanda and Richard's reach. Just as the manager handed me the shiny brass keys, my phone screen flashed with Amanda's name. This time, I decided to answer. "You finally picked up!" Amanda shrieked. The echo in the background made it obvious she was pacing inside a public restroom. "What did you do to my account?" "My payment bounced. The finance guy practically laughed me out of the office." I kept my voice perfectly level. "I withdrew my funds, Amanda." "You can't just do that. I need that SUV today." She demanded, her voice bouncing frantically between anger and desperation. "You gave me an ultimatum last night," I replied, tracing the edge of my new apartment key with my thumb. "Pay for the car or get out of the house." I chose to get out. My finances left with me. "You're acting crazy. You can't just leave me stranded. You are 34 years old and you have a job," I noted calmly. "I am sure you will figure out how to finance a vehicle on your own." I ended the call before she could scream another demand. I slid the phone into my pocket and took a deep breath of the fresh, paint-scented air of my new home. I had spent years acting as a shock absorber for her poor choices, preventing her from ever growing up. I wasn't going to do it anymore. 10 minutes later, Richard called. I watched his name flash on the screen, wondering what exactly he thought he could say to fix this. I answered Richard's call as I walked back to my car. "Diane, please." Richard started his tone, attempting to sound authoritative but failing miserably. "You are tearing this family apart over a misunderstanding. Amanda is in tears. Just transfer the money, come home, and we'll talk about this." "My home is a place where I am respected, Richard," I replied, unlocking my car door. "And last night, you proved that your television program was more important than my dignity. There is no money being transferred, and I am not coming back." The silence on the line was vastly different from his silence the night before. This wasn't the silence of a man avoiding conflict. It was the silence of a man realizing his free ride had just violently crashed. Over the next 3 days, I fully moved into my new apartment. I purchased comfortable, high-quality furniture, set up a reading nook by the large window, and filled the balcony with vibrant geraniums. I called Nathan and explained the entire situation. He actually laughed out loud. "It's about time, Mom. I've been telling you to cut the cord for years. Enjoy your peace." His validation cemented what I already knew: I had made the absolute right choice. The calendar in my kitchen indicated that the first of the month was approaching rapidly. I knew exactly what that meant for the house I had left behind. I had always handled the rent payment directly to the landlord from the joint account. Without my funds sitting there as a cushion, the automatic withdrawal was guaranteed to fail. I watered my plants, enjoying the quiet morning sun, entirely unbothered by the financial storm brewing across town. I knew it was only a matter of time before someone showed up at my door. At exactly 2 p.m. on the first of the month, the intercom buzzer in my apartment echoed sharply through the living room. I didn't rush. I placed my book on the coffee table, walked over to the wall panel, and pressed the talk button. "Diane, we have a massive problem." Richard's voice crackled through the small speaker. He sounded completely out of breath. "The landlord just called Amanda. The rent payment was returned. You need to fix this right now." I leaned casually against the wall. "I don't need to fix anything, Richard. My name is not on that lease. I only paid the rent because I lived there. I don't live there anymore." "We are going to get evicted," he shouted, dropping his usual laid-back facade entirely. "My credit cards are declining at the grocery store. What are we supposed to do?" "I suggest you create a budget and live within your actual means," I answered smoothly. "If Amanda wanted a new SUV so badly, I assume she has enough cash saved up to cover her own rent." "Buzz me and Diane. We need to talk face to face." "No, Richard. This is my home and you are not invited inside." I took my finger off the button and switched the intercom system to mute. I walked back to my reading nook, picked up my novel, and found my exact page. Outside, the city traffic hummed along, completely indifferent to Richard's panic. For the first time in over a decade, my living space was a fortress of absolute tranquility. I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. I just turned the page, wondering how long it would take for Amanda to make her move. The following weeks established a rhythm of peace I hadn't experienced since my first husband passed away. I found a fantastic artisan bakery. Down the street, started reading through a massive stack of books I finally had time for, and took long, undisturbed walks through the nearby park. Through Nathan, who kept a distant ear to the ground, I learned that Amanda and Richard were getting a brutal crash course in reality. Amanda had attempted to take out a high-interest personal loan to cover her rent and was instantly denied. The SUV remained on the dealership lot. Richard was forced to cancel his golf club membership because his accounts were completely frozen. I listened to Nathan's updates without reacting. I just focused on maintaining my own routine. One Thursday afternoon, I was returning from the bakery with a fresh loaf of sourdough. As I stepped off the elevator and walked down the carpeted hallway of my building, I stopped in my tracks. Amanda was leaning against the wall right next to my door. Someone, likely a gossiping relative, had given her my new address. She looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back into a messy clip, and she wore faded sweatpants. When she noticed me, she tried to force a polite smile, but her eyes were tight with resentment. "Nice place," she remarked, looking at my door. "I guess it's pretty easy to live comfortably when you completely abandon your family." I didn't flinch. I held my grocery bag in one hand and my keys securely in the other, keeping a calculated physical distance between us. "I didn't abandon anyone," I stated clearly. "You threw my luggage out of the house because I refused to buy you a car." "There is a massive difference, Amanda." She shifted her weight, preparing to deploy the same manipulative tactics she had used since she was a teenager. "I was just stressed out, Mom. You know how I get when I'm overwhelmed." Amanda pleaded, her voice dropping into a whiny register. "I need you to cover the rent this month. Just this once. Until I can get things sorted out." There was no genuine apology, no reflection on her behavior. It was the exact same demand, simply repackaged in a softer tone. The answer is no, I replied instantly. She let out a loud, dramatic sigh and crossed her arms. She fully expected my maternal instincts to override my logic, hoping I would cave to protect her. But my instincts had shifted. My priority was protecting myself. She took a step forward, trying to invade my personal space and intimidate me. I held my ground, perfectly still. "You can't just leave me with nothing," she stammered, losing her composure. "You aren't left with nothing. You have your job," I corrected her. I unzipped my purse and pulled out a slim manila envelope. I had prepared it days ago, anticipating she would eventually ambush me. I held it out. She snatched it, frowned, and opened it in the hallway. Inside was a printed spreadsheet. It detailed every single expense I had covered for her and Richard over the last 5 years. Rent, grocery bills, her insurance premiums, Richard's medical bills, and the vacations I had fully bankrolled. The grand total at the bottom was over $90,000. "What is this?" she asked, her face draining of color as she read the bold numbers. "That is the cost of my stay in your house," I explained evenly. "I have paid my dues and then some. Any debt you feel I owe you is officially paid in full. Consider that my final financial gift to you." I slid my key into the lock, stepped inside my apartment, and closed the solid wooden door in her face. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Richard. "Diane, we need to talk about our future. Meet me at the diner downtown tomorrow morning." I agreed to the public meeting. I absolutely refused to let him into my apartment, and a busy diner meant he couldn't cause a massive scene. When I walked into the restaurant the next morning, he was already sitting in a booth, nursing a black coffee. He looked tired, his shoulders slumped forward. I slid into the seat across from him. "Diane, you need to come back," was the very first thing he said. "Amanda is looking for a roommate, and I cannot manage these monthly bills on my own. I need you." I noted his exact choice of words. He didn't say he missed me. He didn't apologize for his silence. He said he needed me to manage the bills. "I am not returning, Richard," I said, keeping my hands resting on the table. He rubbed his forehead in frustration. "So what? We'd throw everything away over a stupid fight about a car? We are separating because when your stepdaughter physically threw me out of the house, you decided the television was more important than your wife," I corrected him sharply. "I have closed our joint accounts. You have your income, and I have mine. I am not leaving you with my debt, but I am permanently done funding your lifestyle." Richard stared at me, completely shell-shocked. He opened his mouth to argue, to leverage the years we had spent under the same roof, but I didn't give him the chance. I stood up, placed a $5 bill on the table for his coffee, and walked out the glass doors. I left him sitting alone in the booth, finally realizing the true cost of his passivity. A full year passed, and my life settled into a brilliant, quiet routine. Richard and I officially parted ways. With our finances already separated, the process was swift and unremarkable. He moved into a small studio apartment out in the suburbs. Amanda was forced to rent out 2 of her bedrooms to college students just to keep her house. Nathan flew down to visit me in the spring. We spent the weekend trying out new recipes and walking along the riverfront. "You look completely different, Mom," he noted on Sunday afternoon as we sat on my balcony. "I feel different," I admitted, pouring us both some iced tea. "It feels like I dropped a massive backpack of rocks that I never should have been carrying in the first place." Surprisingly, I didn't hold any bitter hatred toward Amanda. The anger had faded, replaced by absolute clarity. Sometimes loving someone requires letting them fall flat on their face so they can finally learn how to stand up on their own 2 feet. My phone, once a constant source of anxiety, now sat silently on my counter for hours. On a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after I walked away, my phone chimed. It was a text from Amanda. "Hey, Mom. I know it's been a long time. Could we grab a coffee? My treat." I stared at the screen. My treat. I had never heard those words from her before. Nathan had told me she was working a second job and barely holding on, but she was doing it entirely on her own. I didn't rush to reply. I finished watering my geraniums and wiped down the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for a tearful cinematic reunion. Trust isn't rebuilt over a single cup of coffee, but it was a tiny step forward. I sat down and typed a brief, clear response. "We can get coffee on Thursday at 4 p.m. at the plaza, just for an hour." Setting a strict time limit kept me firmly in control of my boundaries. I didn't know what the future held for us, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never hand over the keys to my peace to anyone ever again. Respect isn't bought. It is demanded through unbreakable boundaries. And I had finally learned exactly where to draw mine.